Morning, Daryl. Artist and recovery. Yeah, it's the West Coast beach bum. Or shall I say the desert rat out here in the West Coast. We were at John C. Roseman, California. Right now it's about 5 before 7 in the morning. Still the countdown continues until 2024. You a surfing dude? Well, cool. So your activity must have been around 90s. Because 1980s and 1990s, we actually had the El Nino effect kicking our ass on the West Coast. We had the storm systems moving in, and they were doing damage to the coastline like crazy. We lost piers. Santa Monica had a shutdown. It was the biggest monster we had, actually. But Malibu Pier took a major damage on it. So did Huntington Beach, Newport. Good fishing places, too. Coastline was really taking a drag and battered and beaten. Some of those homes were getting damaged. Had to get them rebuilt. Watching the same thing on the news during those days. I was living in San Fernando Valley at the time. We're about 30 miles away from the coastline, going through the canyons. So just to get to the coastline there. I'm thinking of all the damn storms we had, flooding out Cagle Canyon, Malibu Canyon, Topanga Canyon, and PCH. And there were the major ports trying to get to the colony of Malibu out there. People were commuting, and traffic was a nightmare. It was lousy seeing some of the damage of the El Nino waves just kicking the ass of the pylons and then thrashing the piers like crazy. We're watching that on the news. Sometimes they had to tape, and other times they were trying to do the live action on it. There had been some days when the wind was so damn bad. We'd hear the trees blowing and snapping off like crazy. We'd get collapsed roofs. We'd get dropped places every so often. I'll tell you, when the rainy season really hit in, and you're living in the valley, there had been certain areas that you stayed the hell away from because streets were flooded so damn badly in those days. We have a flood control basin. Back then it was called Sepulveda Dam. I don't know, they've changed the name so many damn times, it's not even funny, but when I was growing up, it was called Sepulveda Dam. All the major rivers coming through the San Fernando Valley, flood control rivers, would go into this. This was the area that kept the rest of the valley dry. But this is also parkland, too. It was specifically made to hold in the water as much as they could. I mean, you flooded out a golf course out there, you flooded in dog parks out there. But it was a major flood territory we had. Let me see, let's say Balboa, but sometimes it stretched all the way to White Oak on the west side, and all the way to the 405 freeway. Even the 405 got a little a little wet and flooded in a lane or two over there. That wasn't bad. Broxton and Lancashire. Jesus. Sorry, Lord Almighty. But that one was bad enough. There are pockets inside the San Fernando Valley that they're lakes. Even by the Van Nuys Airport area, in some of the industrial areas, their topography was a bit sunken a bit. Because our valley was made of sedimentary rock, the whole area was made of sedimentary rock. Runoff from thousands of millions of years just piling up into what our landscape became in the San Fernando Valley. I mean, we may have had fertile, rich soil in certain areas where back in what was it, 20s, 30s, 40s, we actually had orange groves. And then when homes, suburban, the Suburbans came in and changed the landscape around, lost all that good farmland. All those orange groves gone. There were small, very tiny sections that they're actually growing native Southern Californian oranges. Even orange groves in Anaheim got turned into an amusement park. I didn't see, and I didn't surf. I was watching the news too much in those days because that's the only thing we had. But if I was going out there in between storm cycles, I mean, if it was clear enough and we were going out there to the beach, probably during the summertime, it would have been okay. But during the wintertime, no way in hell. No way in hell. If you're a die hard and you're going into the water, dude, we still have the nut jobs to this day to still go out and try to kill themselves with those damn waves we had. You saw them on the news. We were watching it on the news and seeing it live out here on the West Coast. I'm like, man, are they out of their minds? Then again, I kept thinking, well, let's see, we got Huntington Beach going the same damn route. The Point Conception, yeah. La Jolla, we didn't hear any too much because we didn't get any San Diego news. Except there's going to be anything major happening down there. But San Diego's got their own stations out there. So we didn't keep track of what was going on. Jingling of my coffee pot. Hold on a second. I already had the coffee this morning, so it's the morning tea at this point. Yeah, being a native, living out here, you see a lot of things, including earthquakes, mudslides, a lot of geologic stuff happening. The only thing we hadn't had is volcanoes. Thank God for that one. But there's always a chance. There's always a chance we can get a volcano out there. They made a movie back in the 90s, Tommy Lee Jones and Don Cheadle, about a potential volcano in Beverly Hills. It was so damn ridiculous, it's not even funny, but it scared the hell out of me because understanding of geology a little bit back then, yeah, that could have happened to us. And understanding geology right now, yeah, that could happen to us still. But regarding your coastal experience back then, you should have been checked out by the lifeguards, dude. And they would have sent you over to the hospital. During the 80s and 90s, they were setting up and they were really trying to get the trauma centers going during those days. Ate up a lot of costs. That's why they didn't have the system lasting as long as they should have. Oh, that's a different story on that one. Oh, I'd get into that one. Probably next year on that one. Just, oh, what a nightmare. Being out here in California, I learned a hell of a lot of things about my state. Crime, prison, disaster zones, earthquakes, fire, floods, riots. I did mention fat flooding, right? Here's something. I'm not a water hound. I mean, I may be Aquarian. Don't get me wrong. I'm not afraid of the water. Except when I came down for the beach. I've been in the surf. I've been in the ocean. I'll stick to swimming in swimming pools. Thank you very much. At least when I was a lot younger and stronger. But the ocean? Mm-mm. So when we had those high tides kicking in, even after we had that rogue wave coming through, I think that was a tsunami, but they didn't even predict that one. They should have predicted it, but the thing is, the tsunami center that we had out in Hawaii, well, they didn't detect any geologic activity happening at that. If they did, they would have been issuing tsunami warnings left and right. Wave action is not exactly on top; it's also underneath. You don't know whether or not we're going to get a rogue wave with that kind of energy and power until it hits. Unless, of course, you start seeing the water receding, building up, and then whammo! And with the coastline we have a 4 or 5 foot coastline on a slope, and then it drops. Look at the maps on that one. See it in action. To see the water coming down the hillsides, the canyons, and then you see the canyon roads getting clobbered and clogged up. Take them about a day sometimes just to get some of that stuff out, and especially when you have the boulders coming down. The rock gets loose, and then we have Malibu Canyon shut off, which puts more pressure on Topanga Canyon, and not to mention on the freeway systems of traffic trying to get into the coastline area. Or how about even north? When you have to go through Ventura, just get south. So that's a royal nightmare right there, my friend. And not all of us are beach bums. Not all of us are desert rats. We're urbanites. Or suburbanites, actually. Meaning, if we go to the beach, we just party on the sand and that's about it. We don't go into the water all that much. But the rest of the diehards, oh yeah. Boogie boards, surfboards. We also have the sidewalk surface as well. And it's something to see with these kids. The thing is, in some communities that we've actually had, some neighborhoods, every once in a great while we'll have a park shut down in one place, but maybe months later we'll have another park opening up somewhere else. We have to have parks for these people to skateboard like crazy. Other than that, they're going to be skateboarding all over the damn place, and people get pissed off about it out here. We really do. But yeah, I remember those days. The winds were blowing like crazy during those times. Sometimes it's where we actually had dragons flying around, giving us issues. There's a song in The Hobbit that was already written up by Tolkien. They were talking about how one particular lake town, oh, no, not lake town, there was a town right next to a mountain, getting its ass torn apart by wind because of the dragon flying around and tearing things apart. Well, you swear, back in the 80s, if we actually had dragons tearing things apart left to right, seeing trees being toppled left and right because the winds were that heavy. The ground was saturated enough or loose enough. If the soil wasn't if the soil wasn't there, those streams just cars all over the place. You had to make sure that your stuff was still inside. I mean, you've been through hurricane winds before. You've seen how the gusts were like. Well, we had back in those days when we actually had the El Nino kicking in like crazy. Every 11 years or so, we'd get the conditions happening on the West Coast, and then all hell broke loose. Storm systems were just right to flood out the valleys, including San Gabriel. They'd get flooded. Besides San Fernando, and Ventura would get nailed. And then there were portions of Los Angeles, city of Los Angeles, that the water that the rivers out there weren't controlling all the flooding. I mean, yeah, they were flowing it right into the water, into the ocean. A lot of people wanted to surf in those areas, and we had officials kept saying, no, no, no. During these kind of conditions we have, you can't because bacterial count was way up there. And keep this in mind that when we have cluttered areas along our streets and in the spillways, and not to mention in the sewer systems, we got a lot of junk, a lot of junk coming through it. And then you see it in the LA River. And here's the thing that scared the hell out of people left and right on that one. What was it? A lot of things. In certain portions of the LA River, when it was calm enough, we didn't have the storms, but we still had a bit of water here and there in the systems. We actually had kayaking tours. But when the rainy season kicks in, nobody goes in there. But we still have the people that take chances and live in there, including the homeless. And they get flooded out. Search and rescue goes nuts in those areas. That's why we have the urban search and that's why we have the urban search and water. God. Search and rescue, urban water section. When I'm based out in San Fernando Valley, wherever there was a report of people in the water, that's where they'd go. We have urban search and rescue. We have developed the skills. So when there was a natural disaster happening all over the world, LA'd go into action. I tell you. I know you had the hurricanes coming through there, and you had strong storm systems going through your area. The current going along your east coast to the northern area. You'd be waiting for the warm waters of the Caribbean to flow northward so you can do your surfing and stuff. We got the cooler waters out here. We don't get the warm waters until the conditions are really warming up on the west coast, and then we'd really get the hurricanes coming through. But the thing is, because we have the colder currents coming from the Alaskan pipeline down to us along the coast, we don't get the storms that hurricane strength just yet. What was it, last year or a year before? They were freaking out here in the west coast here when we saw this hurricane coming through and people are freaking and panicking. And I'm looking at the damn thing. I'm like, come on, wimp. I've seen worse. The El Nino waters would spawn off these monsters, not coming from equatorial or lateral. They come right directly at us from west to east on a directional heading, not coming up. Because as soon as I know that the strong hurricane was going to be hitting the coastal waters, we're screwed. I gotta back up on this one here. What I'm trying to say is, when the waters were warm enough, when it was generating heat really above the equatorial equator, and we had heat rising up above a certain degree, not temperature, but latitudes and longitude, that kind of thing. So really above the equator, and then we had that layer of energy. The storms being picked up, generated in the mid Pacific, and if the prevailing winds were blowing just right, would blow. And I saw this in the 80s. I saw the photographs that they actually had because I was watching them and seeing the satellite images on this damn thing, and I was like, what the hell was that? A teenager trying to get into a little bit of science and a little bit of meteorology. They would show some of these things. some of the satellites that we actually had out there doing a little short videos here and there about what the weather conditions were like. And then we would see this action happening. And then when it would hit hard. Typhoons, they called them out and right by past Hawaii. They call them typhoons. Closer to us, we definitely call them hurricanes. But we always had hurricane strength Cat 1s back in the 80s. And our structures were barely standing that one anyway. It was bad enough we were dealing with. It was bad enough we were dealing with just hurricane force on the geologic side. We were so worried about us getting nailed by earthquakes than we were about storm systems coming in until we saw the damn piers getting torn apart left and right. As I said before, when we have a storm system coming up the pipeline, coming up on the northern to the northern areas, and they'd hit the cold waters that we have coming down from Alaska. That's our buffer right there. That's the only defense we got concerning about major storm systems. Otherwise, they'd go through the land masses. And when they go through the continent, yeah, we go almost near, but not much because there's not that much energy driving it. Unless, of course, we have high and low pressures directing the energy upwards. And we did see some nasty storm systems coming through. But not as bad as hurricane. But they kept predicting it. And I kept thinking to myself, you guys don't get it. You guys are meteorologists. You should have known better. I'm screaming at the damn television on this one here, dude. Because when we had that theoretical hurricane coming through, I'm like, we had worse than back in the 80s and 90s when we had the El Nino conditions kicking in. We had the warmer waters back then feeding the energy. That would have been nailing us, and it did. It tore apart our coastline. And it took about nearly a decade to get some of those piers back in operation again, including Santa Monica. And not to mention Malibu, and Huntington, Newport, La Jolla, Point Conception. Ay. So when that major theoretical hurricane came through, we just had nothing but we had some heavy ones, but not much. And we did have consistent. See, that's the thing. Short and intense doesn't do it as much. But when you get consistency, that's what I worry about more. Hang on one second. Sorry about that. I took off some peach fuzz. And some of the hair is still trapped on the shirt, so I get the hair irritating my back every so often, so I gotta take care of that thing. But this is what I'd remembered concerning about California weather. And here's the funny thing about this one here, Diller. People kept claiming they can predict earthquakes by weather. I talked to meteorologists and that we had at the campus. And I even talked to geologists that we still had at the campus. A geophysicist. She did her thesis out in Chile to get her doctorate. And Chile actually had a lot of earthquakes. Still does. Active areas out there. So she was having fun with earthquakes. But they kept telling me there's no such thing as earthquake weather. I mean, I had to ask, and including some of the other students, they weren't quite sure. And I said, there is no such thing as earthquake weather. Tell him, Professor. And she was telling him that meteorology has an indirect but not a direct effect. Meaning, if we have mountains, they can block or redirect weather patterns and storms to where they're going to get concentrated or not concentrated areas of flooding. If also we have burned out areas, Daryl, if we had wildfires happening and it burned out hillsides left and right, that's an automatic for flooding out here. Just give it time, and then we'll get it going. And the other thing that nobody else predicts: soil creep. If the ground is saturated enough, without us knowing about it, we get landslides. Even without the storm system coming through, we get geologic activity all the damn time out here. Much like Florida would get it with the sinkholes. I remember we were listening to that all the time in the past, 30, 40 years. Sinkhole over there, sinkhole over there, sinkhole over there, sinkhole over there. You got dissolvable minerals that once it hits water, it it just blends in. It's like putting sugar into water. Not salt, but sugar. And it makes the ground very unstable. So our geology at work. Like concerning about surfing, I know nothing about the damn thing, except people are trying to kill themselves on our water over there trying to have fun. And during the storm systems that we had right now as it is, freaking morons. While we got the king tides kicking in and flooding out our coastal areas, we have sandburns trying to being built up to protect the coastal homes and the businesses that we actually have out there that we also depend upon for tourism. Yeah, welcome to coastal living, I'll tell you that much. Anyway, I'll bore the crap out of you a little bit later today.